This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. It's tax season, and we're all a bit tired of numbers. But here's one you need to hear. $16.5 billion. That's how much the IRS flagged for possible identity fraud last year. Now here's a good number. 100 million. That's how many data points LifeLock monitors every second. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it. Guaranteed. Save up to 40% your first year at LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Welcome to the Parent Footprint Podcast with Dr. Dan. I am Dr. Dan, your host. You are listening to our Parent Footprint Podcast, where our mission is to make the world a more loving and compassionate place, one parent and one child at a time. At Parent Footprint, we firmly believe the key to raising happy, healthy, and engaged kids is for us parents to seek the same happiness, health, and engagement in our own lives. And how do we do this? We do this by knowing and believing that awareness is the foundation of your vision of successful parenting. And with increased awareness and intention, we can be purposeful about leaving a healthy footprint on our children. Today's show is called Clutter-Free Parenting, and I'm excited to introduce you to our guest, Laura Carlin. And Laura is the author of a new book, which we're going to talk about today, called Clutter-Free Parenting, Making Space in Your Home for the Magic of Childhood and the Joy of Parenthood. Doesn't that sound great? She's going to tell us how to do it. Laura received her master's degree in spiritual psychology from the University of Santa Monica and her bachelor's of science in communications from Northwestern University. She also graduated from the Western School of Feng Shui and is a Simplicity parenting coach. Laura lives with her husband and her two sons. Laura, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Dan.
So you have a really cool background, which I'm sure guides what your work has become. And I have this sense that you have merged your work and your life in a way to help people become clutter-free.
I have.
Tell us.
Okay, so I started this when I was very young. I was probably 9 years old when I had a passion for clutter clearing. It was a lot of fun for me to clean out my mom's closets. And it was also very healing for me because at the time, my parents were going through a contentious divorce and my grandparents died suddenly in a tragic accident. And so I was very anxious as a child. And as I got older, I realized that what I was doing as a child is as I was creating more peace and order in my outer world, I was creating greater peace inside of myself. And so then later down the road, when I became a parent, having lived and understood and been passionate about this connection between our inner self and our outer environment, I realized how vital it was that my home support me. Because as a parent, we have so many demands on our time and energy, and, it's challenging. And we have so much of our life with our kids centers around the home, especially young children, and it centers around these daily repetitive tasks like mealtime and bath time and bedtime and homework time. And I realized these moments could be moments of presence and connection where we can really enjoy parenting and be at our best, or they can be very stressful and overwhelming. And the difference was often how well or not my home was working, for or against me. So what I've really learned in the last 20 years with, my own parenting experience and also working with clients is that what gets in the way of the love and joy between us and our kids is too much stuff. That the physical clutter is emotional clutter. So if our homes are feeling overwhelming and chaotic, then we're going to feel stressed out and overwhelmed.
And I love how you just phrased this question. Is your home working for you or against you? I haven't heard anything phrased that way. So tell us a little more about how do we go about determining that?
Okay, so here's just one example. What I love about making space in your home and in your life, and clutter clearing in particular, is even one small step can make a huge difference. Cleaning out one drawer can make a difference. And so this is something my sister, who's my co-author, talked about in the book. And she found that mornings were a stressful time because she had to get her 3-year-old out the door and get to work on time. And I think a lot of parents feel that mornings can be a stressful time, getting everyone out the door. And she realized that it was making the lunch that put her over the edge. And what she found was that the Tupperware drawer was a mess. It had too much stuff in it, stuff she didn't use,
Yep.
missing lids. And so she cleaned out that one drawer and just put the 3 items that she needed to make Tobin's lunch. And it changed her entire morning. She was more calm. She said, I started making better lunches for Tobin. He was happy when she dropped him off at school. And that's one of the things that clutter does, is it has this ripple effect. It can in a negative way, or when you make a change, it can have a ripple effect in a positive way. So even that one drawer, you can see how, if that's a daily pattern, day in and day out, how that could affect, her relationship, Tobin's experience at school, her work, the kind of food he eats. And so you can really think about your day and think about, okay, when am I in the flow? And what do I find to be kind of the pain points during the day? And then you can look at your home and see, usually you're going to find that there's something in the way. It's clutter, or there's something that's not supporting you.
I like that. So everyone listening, think about right now, what is your equivalent of the Tupperware drawer, which I think we all can relate with. And this idea of your pain point, like, right, where do you get frustrated by the stuff and the space, and that gets in the way of, can we just call it, our flow and our ability to connect and be calm with our kids?
Exactly. And really, it is ultimately getting in the way of the love and enjoying parenting, which is something that, one of the reasons I wrote this book is I feel like parenting should be this joyful experience. And all too often, I think it can feel very overwhelming. And it's because we do just have too much stuff. And this isn't something, that we're making up. That's our fault. We're not failures. It's just a fact. It's been reported that the average American home has 300,000 possessions.
Wow.
Even though our homes have nearly tripled in size in the last 50 years, it's still not a space. And there's less people living in them. It's still not enough space because 25% of people can't fit their car in the garage because of stuff. 1 out of 10 families has an offsite storage unit. And it kind of goes on and on. We receive 5 times the amount of information every day than we did 30 years ago. We are being bombarded. And studies have also found that this stuff does elevate stress hormones, particularly in mothers. And families report, not being able to spend time in their backyard or have family meals because of clutter. So it is getting in the way on so many levels. It is stressing us out. It is preventing us from focusing on the things that are truly meaningful. It's preventing us from showing up at our best and having, those moments of warmth and connection and presence with our kids.
Yes. And I'm still struck by 300,000 items. I mean, that's incredible. And just the fact that you said about how stuff elevates stress hormones. I mean, that is huge. And we, as you pointed out, all of us who are parents, we know how stressful just the regular job of parenting can be. So to add stress from stuff, I think on the hopeful side, and what you do and what you're espousing, is we can actually do something about that and lower our physiological responses of stress.
Yes. And that's what I love about clutter clearing. It's tangible. You can do it right away. It's free. And again, even that small change, one drawer, removing one piece of clutter from your home. We haven't defined clutter yet, but I define clutter as anything that is not loved or useful. So even removing one thing from your home that's not loved or useful can have a big impact.
Anything that is not loved or useful. And okay, so I have to go here in this direction is how about those kids? And one of our kids was like this, not as much anymore as an old teenager, but stuff which did not seem useful or loving to us was so important. You know what I'm saying? Like that attachment, that
Yes.
emotional attachment to something found or something given or what have you. How do you deal with that kind of stuff?
Okay, so just one quick thing I'm going to say, with just a little tip, but it actually can really help, is to take a photograph of the item. Oftentimes with sentimental items, and this works for parents and for kids, but even young kids, and I did this with my own kids and clients have done it, for some reason, when you take a picture of it, they'll let it go. And my kids would say to me, okay, I'm like, it's time for this to go. And they'd be like, okay, take a picture. And that would be it. The other thing is we need to focus on how, where our child is developmentally. So when it comes to deciding what is useful or love and choosing what are we keeping and what are we letting go of, that's something that really we involve our children depending on how old they are. When it comes to caring for our things, that's something that they can start doing right away. So for very young children, around 6 and under, it's really, we're in charge of that. We're deciding what we're choosing to keep and let go of. And then around that 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, we're getting their input, but we still have ultimate say. And then for a teenager, we're guiding them. We're trying to hand that off, but we're still guiding them. So part of it is how old your child is. You might just be making those decisions. And if you kind of establish that habit early on, that can help. And I think there is a level of, we want to honor and respect, depending on our kids' age. Of course, we want to honor and respect what's meaningful and love for them. But I think there's also something about when we involve them in caring for it and they realize, okay, and this is something also parents want to be very focused on, is everything we have in our home is a trade on our time and energy. So you can keep this loved thing, but that means that you yourself, have to take the time and energy to care for it, find a home for it.
And many of us have made the mistake, hopefully only once, when we do get rid of something that does not seem important to us, that is very important to our child, without their permission. Not a good idea, as you said, at a number of levels for relationship trust, but also the collaboration is really important.
Yes, and I actually, and this is surprising in some ways in light of a lot of my techniques, but when the kids are young in that age when you are responsible, I actually let parents have a box, ideally an opaque box that's labeled things I want to give away. And that in there can go some of the things if you're not quite certain how your child feels about it when they're young. And then if 3 months, 6 months go by and they haven't said anything, then it's okay to let it go. Because obviously, If you present it to your child, they want everything. All of a sudden, it becomes meaningful again.
Yep. So one of the things that you talk about is how clearing clutter helps raise confident and compassionate children. And of course, if people are listening to this show, they very much care about raising wonderful quality children who are going to be wonderful quality adults. So I know we're all very interested in learning about how clutter clearing can actually help us with this goal of raising the kind of kids we want to raise.
Okay, so I'll talk about that in 2 different ways. So first of all, just on a more basic level, studies have shown that the fewer toys children have, the longer they play, the deeper they play, the more cooperatively and the more imaginatively. And I think we've all seen this on some level when we see a child at a holiday time or a birthday, and they'll barely register the gift in hand before moving on to the next. And then we've seen them when they're so deeply engaged with their play, and it's often with the box that the game came in, that the present came in, or, it's with the bowl in the kitchen and the wooden spoons. And we know how precious that is, that deep engagement. And so what happens is when there's too much stuff is it just ends up translating to nothing is really that important or that valuable, and things become more disposable. And so I really believe that every part of how we are running our homes is obviously, also teaching our children, and how we care for our things and how we run our individual homes is ultimately, I think, how collectively we are caring for the planet and running the planet. And so that can be as simple as, teaching children to care for the things that they have. It can be, whether it's cleaning them or putting them away. And as children get older, it can be about, well, really, what do I need? Am I going to bring this into my home? The kinds of things that we choose, whether they're earth friendly and healthy and so forth.
I love this, teaching children to care for what they have. And I was having these flashbacks of how many of our kids' parties or other kids' parties we've been to. And yes, on the one hand, there's the child who rushes gift after gift after gift after gift. And then there's the child who does spend so much time with the actual box or one aspect of a toy, and then adults are trying to take the toy away from them to focus on all of the other things, and they get upset.
I know. I've seen that too. I know. And it's, I think that also speaks to something, which is some of this is counterintuitive, because as parents, we want to give our kids everything. And sometimes that ends up translating to, giving them more stuff, open the next gift, sign up for more activities. And really, less stuff is more love. We really want to go against that impulse and try to activate the impulse of stepping back, making space, and just allowing them to be. And like you're saying, take that time with that gift or that one part of the present.
And this focus on, I like less stuff is more love and more appreciation and more, I could really see how thinking about this way actually can help also improve our kids' ability to sustain attention, something that a lot of parents are worried about in their kids with this new era that they're all being raised in, with stuff coming at them with media and just stuff, right? So it's almost this meditative exercise to spend time with one thing and focusing on it.
Absolutely. And I think that can only really be done. Again, going back to the 300,000 possessions, one of the biggest benefits to clearing clutter is to give yourself more time and energy. Because if you even think about one item in your home and how much time may have gone into that one item, even before you brought it home, you may have spent time researching which item you wanted, comparing prices, going to the store, you order it online, it comes to your house, you're maybe returning it or unpackaging the box, you're finding a home for it, learning how to use it. The list goes on. And that's one item. And so really the first step is to have this more compassionate relationship is to pare down, because we can't possibly care properly, for that volume of stuff, nor expect our kids to. And so that first step is, the decluttering, which I can take you through. Actually, there's 4 steps that I tell people to use to declutter. And then on the other side of that, there's also mindfully giving away. How are we giving away the things that we no longer need? And there can be a mindfulness to that as well.
Let's go with the 4 steps. We want to know how to do this.
Okay. So the first step is to choose an area. So, and I believe it's important to actually start small and give yourself an easy win, because that's going to motivate you for the more challenging areas. And or look for that pressure point. Look, where is it in my day that things start to fall apart, and see what you can do in your home to shift that around. So let's say you decide to start in the kitchen, and then you would start with one drawer. And then the next step is you're going to take everything out of the drawer. And this is very important, because we want to make sure that we're truly addressing each item, because otherwise it's just too easy to open it, sort of rifle through and not really address each item. And then the third step is to physically clean it. And this is because when we have this empty, clean space, we're going to be much more conscious about what we put back in it. And then finally, the fourth step is determine hold each and every object and ask yourself, is this useful or loved? And if it doesn't meet one or both of those criteria, then it's time to let it go. So of course, that final step, how you can determine whether something is useful and loved. So for the useful things, you want to ask yourself, well, how often do I use it? When is the last time I used it? Do I have something else in my house that fulfills the same function? And then for the loved piece, we want to observe. We want to observe our thoughts and our feelings in our body. So if an object triggers a negative memory, or we instantly have a negative thought, or we just don't feel good, or if we watch, then obviously it's not loved. It's time to let it go. And how our body responds is often a big clue, because when we love something, we take a breath, we feel expansive. And when we don't, we feel a tightening, that little kind of nagging pit in our stomach feeling.
Yep. And then how much practice does it take in step 4? Because I imagine step 1 through 3, you can get into the flow. You can get in the flow of, okay, I'm going to pick this spot. I'm taking everything out. Now I'm cleaning it. And then it's the emotional thing that kicks in step number 4.
It's the emotional thing. But it'll happen before you know it. And what I just suggest is, because you really don't want to over deliberate, because that can break the flow. And so if you're really on the fence, just go ahead and keep it and move on. And that alone just tells yourself, okay, this isn't really that big a deal. You just
Right.
keep it and move on. And that'll actually then allow you to let go more.
So you're making me think of something that happened this weekend. My son was doing a mock photo shoot, and he wanted to get some shadowing, and so he asked me to wear this hat and pull out a shirt that had a certain collar on it and sit in the corner of the room. So I went to the end of my closet in the stuff on the end, which is the thing that I say, well, I'm going to wear these sometime. Mm-hmm. And I took it out, and it's this thing that I've held on to for like 7 years because it kind of has sentimental meaning, and I've never worn it. I put it on for this thing for 5 minutes, and then as I'm putting it back, I think I must have had a foreshadowing of our conversation. I'm thinking, why am I holding on to this in case I wear it in 3 years? And like, that is an exact example of, it's time to let that go.
You just honed in on it. So much clutter can be prevented by living in the present moment, by trusting that our needs will be met on time and in time, because really what is underneath clutter is fear. And it's often fear of letting go or fear of the future. And it is that, just in case, like you said, or someday maybe I'll use it. And oftentimes we're also anticipating this future event that's usually pretty negative. Because so often with clients, I find it's like, well, I'm holding on to this because, what if I don't really like it, but what if I don't have the money to buy one I really do like? Or I think I should hold on to these crutches because what if someone in my family does sprain their ankle again? And so we really want to bring ourselves back to the present moment, let go and trust, that our needs will be met. Because even in your story, what happens is if you hadn't had that shirt, this creativity would take over, and somehow you would have fulfilled that need, that your son had in that moment. So somehow that need would have been met.
I cannot wait for this weekend to go into my closet and take out the whole right 1/4. The whole quarter is coming out. Okay. All right, everyone. So you heard that. What we need to do is choose an area, take everything out, clean it, and then ask the most important question: is this useful or loved? And count, see how many times you've actually used it on a functional perspective, and then most importantly, see how you feel. And as I go back to this shirt, it's like I had a little, if I look back, it's a little tightening in my chest, which is like, why am I keeping this? I knew it. Mm-hmm. So you just validated this for me, Laura. Thank you.
Oh,
okay,
good.
so now tell us about how the mindfulness you were speaking of, how this is also a mindfulness exercise for our children as well.
So, I think that the process of clutter clearing is very meditative. And I always tell parents, starting first with your own clutter. And that's because as our children learn, more from what we what we do, right? And we want to inspire by example.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, like it's part of that, just that flow of just when you're in that process and tuning into yourself, that alone is mindful. And then there's also the piece of letting go, which I touched on earlier. So sometimes people will get things in the bags and then rifle through them again, or just somehow have a hard time letting go. And the way to let go mindfully is with gratitude and with intention. Because I like to say that how we clear can also be as important as what we clear. So we want to be compassionate with ourselves as we go about the process. We don't want to be judging ourselves and thinking, oh gosh, I wasted all this money, or how did I get all of this stuff? And what can release that judgment is being grateful for how the item served us, for the person who gave it to us, for the fact that we had the money to purchase it, and then to send it off with intention that this item can serve someone else for their highest and greatest good. And that's where we can also be mindful about how we dispose of things, that it's in an earth-friendly way, that we give in the way we'd like to receive. So if we are donating items, we make sure they're clean, we fold things, we separate them into bags and so forth.
Yes, and not beat ourselves up and feel guilt and shame and question. And I love the idea of being grateful for having it, for getting it, and even how we are going to perhaps repurpose it or give it to someone else to use who would enjoy it.
Yep, exactly. I find a lot of times too, where the guilt comes in is people will hold on to, I call it too expensive to let go of clutter, which is, you bought an expensive item and you realized I made a mistake. And it just becomes this waste because it's an energetic waste of judgment. And then it's also a waste because so many people rely on the secondhand market. And this could really serve someone else. And so again, practicing that for, forgiveness through just being grateful, it usually releases that judgment.
So the final question I have for you before we get to the parent footprint moment question is, how do people prevent the clutter in the first place? Because of course, sometimes we think a good offense is actually a stronger defense, or so to speak. Like, how do we start off on the right foot?
Okay, so that's such a great question, because the goal is not just to become, experts at this accumulating and letting go of. Ultimately, we just want to reach greater levels of simplicity in our life. So there's 4 different keys. So the first key is to monitor what comes in. So start thinking outside of your home about your choices. Ask yourself before you purchase something, is this loved or useful? Could I borrow it? Do I really need it? And start making choices such as, okay, maybe I am going to borrow a book from the library rather than purchase one. Or when my child receives that bag of party favors, we're going to keep one, choose one, and donate the rest. I'm going to get in the habit of taking the junk mail and recycling it before I even bring it in my front door. And then the second key is we want to plan ahead, because our children are physically growing and changing so quickly that if we don't anticipate that rapid growth, then we're going to be overwhelmed with clutter before we know it. And this is especially the case with young children. So if you're standing at that changing table and you've already struggled to get that onesie over your infant's head, and then you realize, oh gosh, they've outgrown it, and you take it off. If you don't have a plan for that onesie, it's going to go back in the laundry, even though it's clean, or back in the drawer. So you want to start thinking ahead. If you know you're going to have another child, then you would have a bin ready and label it appropriately. Or if you know you're going to donate it, you have a bag ready in a certain spot so it goes right in that bag. And then the third key is to teach this idea of caring for your stuff early on to your kids. And so if you think about it, young children, they take a natural interest in doing dishes and, playing at doing laundry. And when they have that natural interest, usually like 18 months, 2 years, 3 years, we really want to teach them. We want to have them do things for real. And of course, then when they're little, it takes so much extra time and can be really frustrating. But if we put in that investment early on, eventually we're going to have a real helper. And then the final key is that inspiring by example. And the fourth key to preventing clutter is to take care of your own clutter first. You want to inspire by example. And so part of that is you want to provide your children with the gift of a clutter-free environment, because then they're going to want to create it for themselves. And the other piece of it is, if our desk is piled high and our closet's overflowing and we can't fit the car in the garage, and then we go and tell our children, oh, you've got too much stuff, clear your room, clearly that's not going to go over very well.
Hypocritical, right? This is totally parent footprint, which is the idea of like, let's focus on ourselves to model how we want our kids to be. What they see in us, they can emulate for themselves.
Exactly.
We have made it to the parent footprint moment question. Are you ready, Laura?
Yes.
Okay, so tell us about a time when you became aware of yourself as a person or as a parent, and that new awareness had a positive impact on your child.
Okay, so when my older son, James, was almost 4, I was pregnant with my younger son. And we were sitting at the table and he was eating. And I had been feeling anxious about, I think I was a couple months away from Matthew's due date. And I'd been feeling anxious about, well, how is this going to affect James? And how is this going to affect our relationship? And so I was sitting there watching him eat, and I said to him, I said, James, I said, you're going to be an amazing big brother. And he turned and looked at me and said, that doesn't feel good when you say that.
Wow.
Yeah, but he was that kind of kid. And I took a beat, and I got what he was saying, which I'll explain more in a minute. And I reframed, and I said, James, I think you're really going to enjoy being a big brother. And so what I realized a couple things in that moment. So on one level, I had definitely, as I think a lot of us were, been raised with, I think, a lot of pressure and, more critical parenting style. And I, definitely was trying to go in the other direction of praising, and being more, I don't know, I guess just praising my children, being more supportive. And I realized, what, praise can actually be a pressure too. That, when I praise my children, I really want to focus on more of the process rather than the result. And then on a deeper level, what I realized is this child knows my intention. It is not enough just to say the right thing and do the right thing, but I have to be the right thing inside of myself.
So that is something, I bet he has been pushing you to be your authentic self ever since.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. He is just right inside of me. And, but I realized, and this is, very much your message, but I realized how much, how aligned I need to be inside of myself. And I also realized that when I make shifts inside myself, then that, creates a shift inside of my children.
Mm-hmm. You just summarized that beautifully. When you make shifts inside yourself, your children are able to make their own shifts, and how much it just starts with us.
Absolutely.
Laura, thank you for sharing your wisdom about decluttering with us today. And I want to tell everyone to go out and get her new book, which you can find so much more of this information in. Clutter-Free Parenting, Making Space in Your Home for the Magic of Childhood and the Joy of Parenting. And we all do want as much of that joy as possible. Laura, where can people continue to find your work?
They can find me at inspiredeverydayliving.com, which is also our Facebook and Instagram handle. And I just want to thank you so much, Dr. Dan. It was so wonderful talking with you.
Thank you. And I want to end the show with reminding people of some of your pearls to let go mindfully and with gratitude. And how you clear is as important as what you clear. And the wonderful steps, I'm just going to say for people to internalize, what you need to do is clean an area, take everything out of the area, then clean it, choose the area, take everything out, then physically clean it, and then ask yourself, is this thing useful or is this thing loved? And I think you're going to find most of the time, or a lot of the time, it's going to be like my shirt, and it needs to go and will give you immediate clarity and peace. All right, everyone, that concludes our show. Check us out at www.parentfootprint.com, where you can find more episodes to be the parent that you want to be and raise the children that you want for the future. Try to be the person you want them to become. Live your life with purpose and intention. And ask yourself the question I ask myself daily: what footprint do you want to leave?